Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it is afternoon, and this is a working lunch. For those of you that may not realize, there are plenty of beverages on the north side of the room, so if you don't find what you're looking for on the south side, just head north. Somebody lost their room key in the ladies' room, so please check and see if this happens to be yours. And it'll be right up here on the table. Well, you may have noticed in your program that there were no honorary chairwomen, as is typical of a program of this nature. Instead, we ask our chapters to nominate women who have made a special difference in their community. And this is the time when we are going to honor these superheroes. And you will recognize them because they each have on a red, white, and blue ribbon on their name tag. Please turn to page 25. Lynn didn't get that carried away. Turn to page 25 in the program. There are significant biographies listed there, and I'm not going to read all of them. But the superheroes that were able to attend are here at the head table, and we want to thank them. Please hold your applause till all have been introduced. Therese Bangert has dedicated over and please stand, Therese, has dedicated over 5 years of service to humankind, working in prisons and jails for 40 years, and serving as a volunteer police chaplain at numerous homicides in the Kansas City area. Janice Bradley is a pillar in the Peace and Social Justice Center of South Central Kansas. She also works with a group called Not Incarceration, and has an organization devoted to ending mass incarceration and the failed war on drugs. Jill Docking has such an impressive resume of public service, including a run for lieutenant governor 4 years ago. She has served amazingly on behalf of her community, our state, and our country. Mary Fund is Executive Director of the Kansas Rural Center and has dedicated nearly 40 years to fighting the good fight to protect natural resources and promote healthy food and sustainable agriculture. Sandrine Lisk she's a naturalized citizen and has spent more than 2 heroic decades working tirelessly to provide legal assistance and representation to immigrants. She currently serves as the director of the Immigrant Advocacy Network of Kansas. Guadalupe Magdaleno, as executive director of Sunflower Community Action, she leads the effort for racial and economic equality. Lupe was instrumental in passing a law that removed the statute of limitations on rape in Kansas. Lupe immigrated to the United States also at the age of 18, looking for a better future with her husband and 2-year-old son. Annie McKay. We've heard from her this morning, and she mentioned she believes her home state of Kansas is the greatest place on earth and has dedicated her career to help keeping that way. Currently, as president and CEO of the Kansas Action for Children, we heard her 4 years ago speak when she was the executive director of the Kansas Center for Economic Growth. Kaye Monk-Morgan. We've had the privilege of getting to know Kaye this morning. has been a superhero in the world of college administration for over 25 years and has currently been promoted to be the Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs at Wichita State. She has a number of professional achievements in the community, including the Boys and Girls Club of South Central Kansas, and we will be hearing from her shortly on a personal story. Tammy Smith is Women for Kansas' brilliant, politically active, most creative communications director. With every newsletter that you receive on Tuesday, every eye-popping piece of promotion that she creates for your chapters, we simply could not get along without Tammy. Sheryl Spalding is with us from Overland Park. Sheryl served in the Kansas State Legislature for the 29th District from 2007 to 2012. She's currently on the board of Mainstream Coalition and served as a past president. She is also a founding member and serves on the board of the Save Kansas Coalition. And finally, we want to honor Ponka-We Victors as an outstanding record of public service that includes 8 years in the Kansas House of Representatives. As the first Native American woman to serve in the Kansas legislature, she represents the 103rd District of Wichita. She is the ranking minority member on the Water and Environment Committee and serves on the Transportation and State and Tribal Relations Committee. Let's give these superheroes a wonderful round of applause. There are some other women in the audience whom we'd like to acknowledge. And these are women who are currently running for office. So when I acknowledge you, would you please stand and again hold your applause. Renee Duxler. Renee, where are you? Renee is one of those young women that is running for one of the seats in the Sedgwick County Commission. Is Lacey Cruz here? She was supposed to be, but she's probably out campaigning. Shayla Perez. Shayla is running for state representative. Shayla, where are you? She was here. Maybe she's, well, Shayla Perez. Elizabeth Bishop was here, and she's running unopposed. She will be back shortly. Ponka-We Victors is running again and also is unopposed. Yeah. If Senator Marci Francisco will please come forward. Marci is running for state treasurer, and she has served as a senator since 2005, representing the 2nd District in Lawrence. But she has taken a step up, and we've asked her to just take a couple of minutes and tell you about the important role of the state treasurer.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be a part of Women for Kansas. You may notice that at this point, the voter guide doesn't include any information about the Kansas race for state treasurer. Some of that, I think, is because it's hard to know what questions to ask. What does the state treasurer do? So, one of the roles of the state treasurer is to oversee the receipts and expenditures of the state. Kansans should be able to find out how their money is being spent. And I, if I have that chance to do the job, will make sure that more information gets out on the website. State Treasurer helps communities issue municipal bonds. State Treasurer oversees the Learning Quest 529 plans. By several measures, Kansas's plans are among the lowest performing in the nation. Again, we're one of the bottom 5 in this. I'd like to adopt an alternative program that uses our state investment to establish an education savings plan for every Kansas child. Finally, the treasurer should help educate Kansans about financial literacy. Only when every individual and every family in our state is financially secure will the state be financially secure. So our current treasurer was appointed when Mike Pompeo became director of the CIA, and our state treasurer, Ron Estes, was elected to Congress. Jake LaTurner, was appointed to that position by Brownback. So I just want to say we have an unusual opportunity in this race for Kansas treasurer. LaTurner served in the Kansas Senate for 6 years, and they were 6 of the 14 years that I have been serving. So you can check our records on exactly the same votes, figure out where you stand, and vote for the candidate who reflects your values. As we're here often today, be sure to vote. Thank you so much.
Well, we know that the convention 4 years ago prompted a number of you women to throw your hat in the ring. So I would like to acknowledge Susan Osborne. Well, Susan, would you please stand? She made a galloping run for the state house, lost, but that did not deter her. She's recruited another good candidate to run in her place. I know there are other women who have run. Please stand. Betty Taylor from Hutchinson ran. Please. She was a placeholder, but none the rest. She did stand. Jane Burns, you have run before, unsuccessfully, but she's still in there fighting. Are there any other women who have run for office, a local, state? Very good. Thank you. Oh, Michelle. Yes. Michelle Van, there she is. Okay. We have one other person. At the November general election, we Kansans will be electing 5 of the 10 seats on the state school board, districts 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And we don't want to overlook the importance of these offices. So we want to acknowledge that James Hannon from Emporia is running for the District 7. He and his wife are here with us to support Women for Kansas. Would you please stand? There he is, back there. So do take time to meet him and ask him those questions. You can practice asking some of your other candidates. He does have another engagement in the middle of the afternoon, but he will be back this afternoon and evening. Ethel Edwards, would you please come forward? Ethel is a chapter leader up in Northeast Kansas, so she has an orange ribbon, and she has a very important announcement and suggestion that we can all take home with us.
Thank you, Mary. My orange ribbon kind of fell off. This idea focuses on the women not in this room. We're talking to the choir here. We speak often about her in theory, how her kids may use CHIP, and how she barely survives on a $7.25 an hour minimum wage job and needs Planned Parenthood for her personal health care. We speak about her, but we never speak with her. Where do we find her? We encounter this woman in our daily lives, although we probably do not know her name. She is all around us. We just rarely pay attention to her. She works behind the cash register at the grocery store, dry cleaners, and in small businesses. Her employer probably does not offer her health care or any other benefits. She works in school cafeterias. She cleans office buildings in the middle of the night. She is the waitress in the local eatery. She works or worked in retail. She's usually white, between the ages of 25 and 55, does not have a college degree, often works one or more minimum wage jobs, lives in the outer suburbs, rural areas, and small towns, not in the city. About 2/3 of this group is divorced and raising children on their own. She feels invisible and powerless. In order to successfully win her back, because she's the woman who voted for 45, she must be approached by someone who she already knows who can engage with her casually and not in an overt partisan way. Discuss issues with her, health care, a living wage, taxes, not partisan politics. This approach works by building relationships one person at a time. Will you please reach out with me and share this idea with your friends and commit to reaching out to 5 of these women? Thank you.
Well, we've experienced a lot today, and before we move on, we're going to have just a minute for some musical refreshments. Ann Zimmerman is from Salina, grew up singing folk songs with her Kansas family. Besides writing and winning award-winning songs and recording and playing concerts for all ages, she is a professional mediator with a Harvard law degree. Welcome, Ann Zimmerman.
And what my bio doesn't say is that I ran for office and I got elected to the school board. So run for office. George Varga, the guy who was walking around last night with the camera down the street with us, he took this song that I recorded in the past and that I played at the last Women for Kansas convention and turned it into a music video. And I'm hoping that it has sound with it. I'm really kind of going to just lip sync along with myself here. So hit it. This is called Go Away and Die. I wrote it trying to get into the mind of Congress and figure out what they were thinking. If your life is falling apart, kids don't have enough to eat, lost your job, lost your wallet, and the roof's begun to leak. Here's the message you've been needing, the final answer from on high. Oh, it's your fault, it's your problem, go away and die. Your man walked out without warning, left the light bill still unpaid. Baby won't sleep through the night to hear him fuss as you dismayed. You'd like to take him to the doctor, but you've heard the latest cry, saying it's your fault, it's your problem, go away and die. Go away and die, my friend, go away and die. It's your fault, it's your problem, go away and die. Greg Allen on the fiddle. Rodeo Drive and Wall Street, they're all paved from our pockets and thrive. Hear the words of wisdom of the wealthy from their thrones. The poor, the sick, the very slow should get by on their own. If you were a corporation, if you were a millionaire, you could buy the latest tax break, save $1 billion here or there. You could look upon the lowly, frown, and give these words a try. Take personal responsibility. Go away and die. Go away and die, my friend. Go away and die. It's your fault, It's your problem. Go and die. One more time. Go and die, my friend. Go and die. It's your fault. It's your problem. Go and die. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And we want to remind our superheroes to take a token of our appreciation, the long-stemmed sunflowers, a reminder of Kansas. Now we'd like to welcome back to the podium Kaye Monk-Morgan for a personal story of what's really happening in our great state.
Hey, y'all. They're readying the PowerPoint, and so I'll give them a second to get together. Why don't we applaud the folks that they have been working really hard back there. Several of us have come in with PowerPoints or music or video and just kind of handed it to them and said, hey, make this work. And every time they've been able to do that. And so gratitude is one of those things we all need to be in the spirit of sharing. I initially responded to Lynn's request to come and hang out with you this morning as a moderator, because those of you that know Lynn Steffen and know her well know that it's really not optional. Questions don't really end with a question mark and go up at the end. It's more of a declarative sentence, and so you kind of say, yes, absolutely, I'll do that. And gladly did so. And not long thereafter, she found her colleague and friend, Janet Wright, to send an email following, asking, hey, will you also give a brief kind of synopsis about parenting and being a mom and the impact of that. And it was about 3 months ago, to which I said, yeah, sure, absolutely, and I responded to that email. And then literally about a month later, or about a month ago now, I pulled that email up to kind of see what this month was going to look like on my calendar, and I said, oh, shoot. Sister Teresa's still here. I said I would do that, and I thought about ways that I could frankly get out of this. Not because I'm afraid to speak. I do a lot of that work, both in my job for pay and some of the other things I do community-wide, but frankly, in all transparency, because of the topic. And because of you. This is probably one of the most vulnerable moments I'll ever have in my adult life, because I'm going to get an opportunity to share with you both my greatest points of pride and my greatest vulnerabilities as a mother. And frankly, it's not something I've been looking forward to. But these women, who I call my friends, that I don't say no to often, convinced me. When I was probably 21, working at Wichita State University and dating the most handsome of men, Mr. Derek Morgan, he asked me what I wanted my life to look like. And I drew him a picture. And I found this picture when we moved into our second home, and it's not as clear for you as it might be in real life, but I found it, and it's framed, and it's hanging on a wall in our house. And my undergraduate degree is in chemistry, my master's degree is in public administration, and I'm working on a doctorate degree in educational leadership. I am not an artist. Hence, you will see stick people. But I drew a picture of what I wanted to look like, and it included the house of my dreams and the car that I thought I wanted to drive. You'll see that there's a minivan. It was my intent that he would drive that, because I'm much too vain to engage in minivan driving myself. I wanted an Ivy Leaf swimming pool, and I wanted a tennis court, and I wanted lots of love and trees, and I drew 2 children. And you may or may not be able to tell in this picture, but I'm the girl, and you can tell I'm a girl because I have a little triangle skirt on. In my mind, it's got pleats. And there are 2 male children because I knew in my heart of hearts I wanted male children. Hashtag boy mom, right? I knew I wanted that. And when, in my faith tradition, when you speak into existence those things that you want, and you pray upon those things, and you live a faithful life, God gives you what you ask for. And I have had the distinct pleasure with my husband of parenting 2 of the most awesome young men ever to walk the face of the earth. And I say that with great pride. I thank Miss Michelle Van, who stood earlier, because she's had the opportunity to teach both of my young men in her classroom, one of which was probably a little easier than the other. But I've been fortunate and I've been blessed to have that which I thought I wanted. And I did want. But much like other things in life, when you're deciding what it's going to look like, you don't always have the entire picture of what it is you're asking for. And so when I prayed for and asked to be a parent of young men, I didn't know that the high school graduation rate for black boys in the state of Kansas was 20% less than their white counterparts. When I asked to parent African American young men, I did not know that the AP advanced placement enrollment is double the rate for white boys than it is for young black boys. I did not know that the 8th grade reading proficiency rates for black males are at 26% points less than their white counterparts, and the reading gap is even greater for those students. I didn't know that the suspension rate for African American men was going to be 10% point higher. I didn't know that even if my husband and I worked really hard, succeeded in college, earned better than a living wage, and actually decided to be financially prudent and grow in assets, that my children would still be more likely to live in poverty than their white counterparts. I did not know that men raised in the top 1% were equally as likely to be incarcerated as white men raised in households that meet the poverty line. I knew I wanted sons, but I did not know the life into which I was going to bear them. I did not know. I did not know that the age of 6 and 8, or 6th grade and 8th grade, my kids would wonder who they are. I grew up in a proud history of being an African American woman. I know exactly what that means. I was fortunate enough, 2 weeks ago, my grandfather passed away. He was 102 years old. Died and just went to sleep, right? So you live a blessed life, you get a blessed ending. I knew what it was like to be black in the United States of America, and as a second-generation Kansan, I knew what it meant to be black in Kansas. I didn't have a feel for my children's experience and what that was going to mean as African American men. I didn't know that when we moved into our home in College Hill, and we're really excited about it, that at 6th grade, all of their little friends that they'd hung out with for the last 5 years, 10 years, would all of a sudden develop a different definition of who my children were. I didn't know that my kid was going to come home. This very picture, we bought them, actually we didn't buy them, we have secured for them signed jerseys from 2 of the NFL football players, Troy Polamalu and Larry Foote, as a result of Super Bowl, I think it was 2009. And they received these after Peyton, who's the oldest of the 2, came home in tears one day and said he wanted a LeBron James jersey just like Jack. And I said, well, you know, we can get you a LeBron James jersey just like Jack, but why do we want to look like Jack, right? I mean, Jack's fashion sense is a little off. Not sure why we want to follow Jack. And then he said to me with all the most sincere heart, and then I want yellow hair and I want it to be flat. At that point, I had to explain to Peyton that he was black. And he's not ever going to have yellow hair. And heaven help us all, it's not ever going to be flat. It's not how hair grows from your head. But my child was saying to me that it was tougher to be in his skin than it was for the colleagues and the peers for which he'd hung out with, he'd grown. He also was sharing with me that while he was just one of the 6 on the basketball team until he became a 7th grader, now his friends recognized as they went into the middle school system that something was different about being black and that Peyton wasn't just like them. Very hard lesson, an experiential conversation we have to have at our household, and I'm guessing that most of you not had to have. It was that very same year that Peyton's friends came over, and there was kind of this, we decorated for Christmas like most folks do, probably way too much stuff crammed in corners, and one of the kids says, "Hey, you guys don't have any Santa Clauses in your house." To which my precocious younger child said, "Nope. You ever seen a black Santa Claus?" And the kid said, "No." He said, "Well, that's why we don't have one." An aha experience of if things don't reflect who you are in the greater media, you don't see yourself in those spaces. We all have to help our children come along a way where there's an identity development process, where you have to explain to them who they are, and in my place, in my faith, whose they are. It's been awesome to have a grandfather for whom they can sit and say, when all else fails, you're John Monk's great-grandson. That's the stock from which you come. But it's not always easy for them to go into those spaces. There came a time where not only did I have to tell my kids who they are, I had to explain to them who others think they are. One of the most difficult occasions I ever had as a parent was the day that we removed all of the hoodies in our house. My children were, I think Peyton was 14, Cameron was 12. Cameron had come running back, for those of you that know the Wichita community, coming through the house, running through the neighborhood with Jack and Garrett and Hugh, and coming from the swimming pool. Summer afternoon, and he's got this hoodie on, and he's running through the neighborhood, and all is well because it's summer, there's no school, he doesn't have on any shoes. He may have had on pants, I don't know. I don't know. And I say to him that I'm going to need all of your hoodies. And he said, "Why?" And I said, "You know, I don't know that we really want to talk about it." But it was that very summer that a young man walking through his neighborhood, eating Skittles and drinking some soda, was literally killed. And when Cameron didn't understand why I needed his hoodies, I showed him this. There before the grace of God go I. There but for the grace of God goes my child running through a neighborhood where we're really the only black people who live in our neighborhood, right? Everybody, I've gone to school district meetings when we're talking about redistricting, and there are dots for all the people and where they live, and you're a different dot based on your race. I know where my dot is. I can see my dot. The black people who live on the corner of Delrose and English. I said, "Baby, you can't run through this neighborhood like that anymore, because your mother's afraid for your very life." A 10-year-old doesn't get that. A 12-year-old doesn't get that. But we got rid of every hoodie in our house. I counted them. It was about $500 worth. Lots of different sizes. We wore button-downs and sweaters. They were like, "Can we not have a basketball jersey?" No, you cannot wear a basketball jersey. Because who others people think you are is those lists of statistics that I read to you That's oftentimes who people see when my sons enter the room. I didn't know that when I asked to have sons. I didn't know that when I gave birth, but I know that now. And the most painful part of being a parent is having to show your children that that's who people think they are. And in spite of, they have to be successful. Over the last 2 years, 17 young African American men have been gunned down. Some might argue for good reason. I don't know that there's ever a good reason to have to kill someone unless you absolutely, I don't know. In 2 years, this is what my young men see. Both of my children, Cameron called me his senior year in high school. And these are conversations we have to have at our home, right? We actually practice what happens if the police pull you over. We have to have that conversation. What do you do? What do you say? Who do you call? What do you do when this happens? And not many people have to have those conversations. But this is what happens. While a lot of people, no matter what your political persuasion, hashtag love the police, but the police kill black boys. Not a reality that a lot of folks have to deal with, but certainly one that I've had to have conversation. The first time my children were contacted by police, Peyton was on his way to prom. And his dad let him drive his brand new Lexus and with his date. And I pulled him over and I had a conversation and I said, you gotta be safe. Check with her parents when you ring the doorbell, say hello to her dad, shake his hand. And my grandfather's sitting in the back of the room and he says, who are you taking? Peyton tells him the young lady that he's escorting to the prom with great pride. And my grandfather said, is she white? To which Peyton said, yes. My grandfather excused me from the room and had a separate conversation with my son. Now do know, my grandfather was married to my grandmother, who's not my bio grandmother, but the grandmother that I grew up with, who also happened to have been white. So my son is pulled aside by my grandfather and said, listen to me. Now I can only tell you the version of what Peyton repeated because they had some private words. Safety and security of her safety and security is sacrosanct. But if you gotta run, run. And at that point, my grandfather recounted how he actually moved to Wichita, Kansas. Because his older brother had gotten in a fight in Haynesville, Louisiana in 1932 at the general store. And he actually hit a white man. To which my grandfather's mother said, take your brother as far as you can go. Peyton came back to me and was like, Mom, do I have to go to prom? I was like, well, we've paid for it, yes. You're going to prom. And sure enough, about 1:30, my phone rings. And I'm sitting there like most mothers are when your kid is 17 and he's out after midnight and I'm watching, watching the dots, find my friend. And my kid calls, and I know it's his number, but I don't hear a voice. He literally has called the phone, as he's been taught, and laid the phone down because he's been pulled over by the police. And I hear the occasion, and of course, I'm frightened. I wake my husband and I say, at this point, I need you to go find this car. Here's his dot. Go see where he is. And everything went okay. He certainly showed up a little later than curfew, and his response was, I don't know what I did. Why did I get pulled over? And we explained to him that oftentimes nothing. His The question the police officer asked him was, "What are you doing in this neighborhood at this hour?" And his response was, "I'm trying to go home." "Well, you can't possibly live here." He's like, "Do you know my mom?" "That's exactly where I live." "Well, whose car do you have?" "My father's car." "Well, show me proof of insurance." And I'm listening to this conversation thinking, please, Lord, just hand him the piece of paper. Don't think, don't talk, don't ask, just do what he's asked you to do. It lasted about 5 minutes, and Peyton made his way home. We had a family conversation that following Sunday to talk about, okay, these things might happen. Again, let's go over what are the notes, who do you call, what do you do? We really thought it was kind of over. Every family's going to get one of those incidents, right? Well, fast forward almost a year, and the phone rings with my second son, who's coming home from high school. It's 5 o'clock, track practice ought to be over, he ought to be here soon. And yet again, I hear the phone ring, I pick it up, and there's no talking. "Cameron, are you there? Cameron, are you there?" And I can hear an exchange between he and someone else. And sure enough, he's been pulled over. I wait till the call is over, and then the phone disconnects. So I can't hear any more of the conversation. I wait about 5 minutes, and I call, and my kid is bawling. And he said, "Mom, I peed on myself." I said, "It's okay. Come home. I'll meet you there." I asked him, I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, I was driving, and I thought I could make it, and I hurried up, and I turned the corner, and I turned right in front of the police officer." I said, "Well, that wasn't very safe driving." And he said, "No, it was really stupid." I said, "Well, was he rude?" He said, "No. He was really nice." I said, "Well, did you get a ticket?" He said, "No. He was really nice." I said, "So what did he say?" He said, "Well, he explained to me why it was against the law and how I shouldn't do these types of things. And he gave me a warning. And, he said, good luck on your track meet." And we talked about running track. He said he was really nice to me. And I said, "Well, that's good. So why the upset?" He said, "Because I thought he was going to kill me." I thought he was going to kill me. In the United States of America, in 2018, that a 17-year-old child has an experience that borderline copies the one that his 100-year-old grandfather had, is beyond me. It's beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. I think I'm going the wrong way. These are my children now. They're not so scary, although they're really big. And in my humble opinion, parenting them along with my husband has been my greatest joy. But it has also given me an opportunity to see a side of our communities that many of you, fortunately or unfortunately, will never have an opportunity to see and will never be exposed to. When my children show up, they show up in spite of some of the created barriers, not because they haven't had educational access. Both of their parents are college educated. Not because they're impoverished, because we work really hard to make sure that they won't be. Not because they don't have family support systems that love them, because they're more loved than anything in the world. Not because they don't have adequate role models. They have grandparents and parents and uncles and cousins who love them. My children's barriers come as a result of the fact that they are male and they are African American in a country that was not created to love them. It just wasn't. And explaining that to them is one of the most poignant things that as a parent I have the responsibility of doing. On a frequent basis, I am a chief administrator at an institution of higher education, and I have to tell my kids, you're in college, but college was not created for you. This has been retrofit. So when it doesn't work for you, know that that's okay. Break it down, rebuild it. We don't like the ship, build another one. Understand that ultimately this is your charge. It's not fair. It doesn't get better. In some cases, there are wins, but sometimes you're going to lose. This is your reality. Parenting young men, particularly young men of African American descent, in many cases is not unlike parenting any other child. It's a process. You get little ones and you teach them the lessons they can handle at that point. They get a little older, you teach them what they can handle there. Every year, there's a different set of lessons that they have to learn. What I'd ask and what I remind my children of, and what I'd ask of you, there's a set of statistics that will always come before your interaction. What we've been taught, what it is that we think we know, how we engage with the world. I remind them that yes, all of those former things are true. But 48% of African American men above the age of 25 have a college degree. I remind them that 82% of African American men do have high school diplomas. I remind them that 67 to 80%, depending on which year you pull, of African American men are actively engaged in the labor force. Only 42% of men, or 42% of those men, are holding white-collar jobs. While the number of African American men in prison is higher than any other group, it's 6%. That means 94% of black men aren't in prison, haven't been in prison, haven't engaged in the system. So the narrative that creates the photo of who these people are the narratives that we create. It's the story that sells. And oftentimes it's the story that keeps us in our place. It's a story that creates the fear that we won't engage in areas where we haven't engaged before, where we won't look for unusual voices, where we won't go into spaces where we might be singular or less. I have to remind my children every day that you're a king. I created you to inherit the earth. That you were born with God's got great plans for you. Despite the number of people who may decide that you don't deserve that. It ain't up to them. It ain't up to them. My children are my greatest joy. The one thing, the two things that when I die, I want people to look back and say, wow, look at those boys. Haven't they grown up into fine young men? Haven't they lived out the principles that their great-grandfather gave them? Not a list of statistics, not a vision of who people think they might be, but every day my charge is to remind them of who they are on the inside and how they present themselves to the world is absolutely beautiful. My challenge to you, when you see the statistic, look at the other side of the percentage. Do some reverse ordering of the information that's fed to us as a community. And remember that just like John asked you to vision those children that you loved, just like he asked you to take in and love on those kids that are most important to you, these kids have somebody who's looking for them, whose eyes are closed, who's promising and praying for their prosper and not for their harm. And I ask you to join me in that village of loving every kid that way. Thank you so much for your time.
Wow, what a story. Well, as our superheroes are leaving the stage. Let's give them one big last round of applause. We'd like to welcome to the podium now our beloved Sarah Bagby, the owner of our favorite luncheon place and bookstore, and also the hostess of many, many, many of our Women for Kansas meetings. And she will introduce our special luncheon speaker.